All right, welcome back from your break. Welcome back from breakout sessions, everyone. We're glad to have you with us for our volunteer panel on growing relationships, how volunteers build trust with lawmakers. My name is Mindy Ahler, and I am CCL's Congressional Liaison Program Manager. I work with over 600 of our CCL volunteers who serve as liaisons and backup liaisons to each of our members of Congress. I regularly get to hear stories of successes and challenges from these volunteers. And so I'm glad to be able to share some of those with you today. I'm delighted that we have three of our dedicated CCL volunteers here to join me in conversation and to share their experiences building relationships with their member of Congress. So I'll introduce you to each of our panelists, and we'll start off with some stories and some questions that I have prepared for them. But then we also want to include your questions. So please add your questions to the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in a little bit. So Linda Racine joined CCL in 2018 and has been a state coordinator for Michigan since 2020. Linda lives in Traverse City, Michigan, and along with Elizabeth Dell, she co-leads the Grand Traverse Area chapter. She also co-leads the CCL Presbyterian Action Team, along with Bill Bray. And when not working on CCL, Linda is also active in Rotary International Service in Guatemala and Uganda and co-chairs her church's Creation Care team. Kay Carne has been a Citizens Climate Lobby volunteer for more than a decade, acting as both a liaison to Representative Don Bacon, who's a Republican in Nebraska's 2nd District, and also as a chapter co-leader in Omaha during that time. Prior to volunteering with CCL, Kay was an accountant for PricewaterhouseCoopers in New York, DC, and California. She received her master's in environmental policy and politics from the University of Michigan and worked as a sustainability consultant in Omaha, Nebraska. She has bravely brought her children to CCL conferences in DC as well, one as an infant and one as a young teen. David Kunhardt has volunteered with CCL since 2013, and after a long career creating community development partnerships, he entered the solar industry in California in 2007, where he created partnerships to save money for schools and cities for 13 years, until retiring to Maine in 2021. He was previously a CCL liaison to Congressman Jared Huffman and Senator Kamala Harris, and since 2021 has been co-liaison for independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He is very busy in retirement. He chairs the Board of Land Trust in New Hampshire, where he's also on a town energy committee, and is also on the board of a nonprofit Piper Shores Life Care Retirement Community in Scarborough, Maine. So thank you all for joining us. And as our audience can hear, you all have rich lives in addition to CCL, and bring all of that experience along with you in building these relationships. I'd like to have you start off with these stories that you have, and I'll actually just call on you in order because I know we have a few pictures to share along with them. So I know you each have a story of kind of a key moment in those relationships. So Linda, would you start us off by talking about your relationship with Senator Stabenow?
Oh, sure. Senator Stabenow has been such a passionate climate champion, and we'd built a really strong relationship with her office over the years. So when she announced she was retiring, saying thank you was something we really needed to do. So on the Michigan Leader Call, we thought about how would we go about doing that? And the idea of planting trees in her honor almost immediately rose to the top. Not only because trees are important in addressing climate, but they symbolize so many things that she worked for in her career. And we thought trees would be a really long-lasting kind of public testament to her commitment. What was great too, the city of Lansing had just renamed one of its parks, the Debbie Stabenow Park, and Lansing was where she was going to be living, so perfect site. So team went to work managing all the logistics and raised enough money among CCL volunteers to not only plant 6 good-sized native trees, but also create the stone marker that you see in the slide. Hopefully that's showing up.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, so the dedication was in May. It's a really fabulous event. The mayor of Lansing was there, staff from both Senator Peters and Senator Slotkin's offices, and of course, Senator Stabenow. And she was great, so appreciative. She said, yeah, I can't think of anything more perfect than planting trees. And it was fun. She talked a bit about the history. Like years ago, she said she tried to get a hearing in the Senate on climate, and leadership wouldn't do it. So she said they instead held a hearing on severe weather. And she laughed about that and said, we've come a long way since then. And all of you have been so important in this process. Keep it up. What you do is so important. She talked about how some of the actions of this current administration to undo climate policy. She said, the only thing that's going to slow this down is engaged citizens. And Citizens Climate Lobby has been at the forefront of the issue, and she called it the issue. She was just very encouraging.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think we have another picture here that goes to my other question, which is how long have you been working on this relationship? And even I think you were talking about when we were meeting ahead of time about the Zoom meeting you had with her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been many, many years. Absolutely excellent liaison work over so many years. Building strong relationships with the staff, really, but living the CCL values, being respectful, having integrity, well prepared, both with the DC staff and with staff in state. And we really work to find opportunities for FaceTime. That's hard to do with senators. I don't know how it is in other states, but I'm not sure we've ever had a face-to-face meeting in DC, but we did attend for coffees. I think there's a picture there of a couple of the coffees. We also, because of this trust we had built over the years, had a statewide Zoom meeting with her during COVID because we couldn't go to DC, and we had 150 people online. It was just a great conversation. Yeah, it was a good event.
That's fantastic. Thank you. If you would talk to us a bit about Representative Bacon.
Sure. So I was asked to join this panel because we took Representative Bacon on a hike this summer. Senator John Curtis, then Representative John Curtis from Utah, was on one of our national calls and suggested that every chapter reach out to their member and take them on a hike and highlight some of the wonderful nature around your city. So we decided to do that. And we gathered not only CCL volunteers, but we also asked leaders from a solar company, a leader from a sustainability consulting firm, a leader from Audubon, a leader from a local League of Conservation Voters, Nebraska Conservation Voters, and others that we've interacted with who we know care about climate change. And so we gathered maybe 20, 25 people and took them on a hike through the prairie. And he loved the event. He said he wants to do it again next year. And it was a great way for us to interact with him, but also bring in a broader community and show him that it's a much bigger group than just us from Citizens Climate Lobby that he had met with a number of times before.
And I think it looks like it was a pretty warm day.
Yes, it was a heat advisory day. Um, and I think it got up to over 90 degrees while we were hiking. We went in the morning. So it was quite sweltering. And we did sit down and have a policy discussion with him at the end of the hike, thank goodness, in air conditioning. But there were some hills, so some of us were sweating pretty good. But in the air conditioning, it was good to both have something fun to do with him in nature and then have a more serious policy discussion for about 30 minutes in an air-conditioned, restored barn. So it's kind of the best of both worlds and something we'll try again. We'll do again with him and try, he's retiring. We'll try it with whoever takes his seat.
That's fantastic. Thank you. David, will you talk a little bit about your surprise encounter with Senator King?
Yeah, this story has much more to do with Citizens Climate Lobby and its preparation than with me alone. There he is with a red tie in the center, not on a formal meeting day, but he has pretty much every Wednesday in his office, he opens up and has blueberry muffins or blueberry cake for anybody who happens to be in Washington who's from Maine. And so it's a very friendly thing. The folks on the one, two, three, four of us on the left-hand side of the picture were in meetings with his staff the day before. And Peter Dugas there in the green shirt and I had one-on-ones with him the day before, but then we were able to just socialize with other folks from the state, and it was fun. But the specific story is that a year before, I'm going to the DC and go into the little airport in Portland, and I'm wearing a blue jacket and just this little subtle CCL sign. I don't know if you can even see it, but I notice Senator King with a coffee leaning on a column waiting for the same airplane that I'm waiting for to go to DC. And so I started to walk over to him with a smile on my face. When I was 12 feet away from him, he saw my little sign and he said, "Oh, Citizens Climate Lobby, I have a meeting with you guys tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I'm looking forward to it," because it's always very substantive.
That's fantastic. And one of the important things you mentioned there is knowing what your senator looks like is a good thing. And yes, those subtle little things like CCL buttons can make all the difference in bringing things together. But yes, also that importance of the longer relationship that he knew immediately who CCL was when he saw your button. Thanks for that. Um, so let me just ask, how long have you been working on this relationship? Okay, let's start with you.
So we actually asked to meet with Representative Bacon before he was elected in 2015. And I think that's a really important strategy that everyone else across the country should be using, especially if you have a competitive primary or a competitive race for the congressional seat. Candidates are more apt to want to meet with people because they want to get to know their voters. They want to convince people to vote for them. We're nonpartisan, and CCL does not endorse anyone, but they still want to get to know their constituents. So we met with Bacon in 2015, using the CCL way, being appreciative, being respectful, um, clearly being nonpartisan. And so I think that opened the door to building a strong relationship with him over the past decade, pretty quickly.
Thank you. And David, how about you? How long have you been working on this relationship, both you and your state?
Oh, well, the state of Maine chapter has been active with our members for, I think, more than 10 years. I relocated to the East Coast from the West, where we spent 24 and a half years in 21. So I started to get on meetings right away, on Zoom meetings together with him and our wonderful chapter here, partly because Peter Dugas, who is the coordinator for Maine, has been always very good at painting the palette of who is going to meet with the member of Congress. Always bring in somebody who is an economist, because our senator is very eager to get the economics right, and he usually has pushback questions based on the economy. How is this going to affect the price of gas? What is all the different, pushback? And so we're careful to bring in one meeting an economist I know from the West Coast, Robert Archer, and also from the East Coast, David Vail from Bowdoin, and was able to provide a very high level of conversation. And this is one reason why we have been building trust. But at the same time, Peter has been bringing in students. One student who eventually became an intern in DC for Citizens Climate Lobby, Danielle White, and also folks from different parts of the extensive geography of our state. So, best of all, I hope Linda can hear us now and can speak. But best of all was a day when Peter brought in an owner of a whole bunch of auto dealerships who knew the congressman from the time the senator from the time he was our governor, and a labor leader into the same meeting. And so the senator looked around the group and he said, anytime you've got a leader in business and a leader in labor together coming in the same point, I got to listen to you.
I know each of you have talked before about having constituent breakfasts or coffee hours that they offer in DC. And I'm wondering if you can say a little more about that experience. Like, how is it different from a lobby meeting? And is it something you would suggest that others look for? Let's start with you, Kay.
Yes, so Nebraska is pretty unique. We have something called the Nebraska Breakfast, and it's actually the oldest ongoing gathering of its kind. It's been going since 1943. And what happens in the Nebraska Breakfast is there's no actual food, but both of our senators and our three representatives from Nebraska will gather, and essentially probably 100 Nebraskans will be in this room, and they will present what they've been working on, the committee work they've been doing, the different bills that they're working on. And so it's a way for them to inform their constituents that are in DC as to what's important to them. But then they also ask each group to stand up and introduce themselves. So you get a flavor for who is in DC to lobby them as well. And there's time before the more formal meeting and after the more formal meeting to talk with the members. Senator Ricketts came over and talked with my daughter, which was in DC to lobby, and wanted to give her extra credit for meeting him. So it's just an informal but informative way to interact with them. So I would encourage any state that has a population of maybe less than 5 million to try and get this going, because it's a really good way to interact with your members.
That's fantastic. Thank you. David, what about you?
Well, I've already mentioned the blueberry muffin breakfast that are hosted by the senator, but I want to bring in another suggestion that actually our team, when I was on the excellent team led by Dr. Peter Joseph in Marin County, California, we had met several times with very environmentally progressive, I mean, very, very environmentally progressive, but not CCL champion member of Congress. And we went in with, again, Peter brought in a couple of us who'd met before, an economist and a writer and a volunteer fireman. And that member of Congress had said, because he'd met with us a few times before, oh, I know you guys. And he came sort of accidentally down the hall, probably from the men's room, as we were waiting outside his office. And he saw us gather together. And he saw in particular the sort of 6 foot tall, 15-year-old Kai, who is very articulate. And the congressman said, okay, I know you, and who's this? And Kai spoke up, and he spoke quite eloquently. And Congressman said, maybe I do have some time in my schedule. Come on in. So every member of Congress is an individual, is a human being, and they respond in predictable ways to predictable messages from the usual folks, even if they're, smart and self-respecting volunteers from CCL, and they want to hear a new voice. They want to see what is behind the passion of a 15, 16-year-old student who's really good.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you for that. Linda, talk a little more about the breakfast that you attended for Michigan.
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity. It's maybe similar to a lobby meeting, but as Kay mentioned, a lot informal, not as structured. The way Debbie Stabenow's office did it is groups would get in line and wait for their opportunity to meet with her. But as you're standing in line, the staff is circulating. So this is a wonderful opportunity to have an informal conversation with the staff and learn a little bit more about what the office is working on, what we're working on, build the relationship just as we're standing in line. And then you get a few minutes with the senator, and that's great. So yeah, it's very good opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know for Minnesota, it's usually we get to line up and have a photograph. So you get about 30 seconds with the member just before they snap a picture. But that's a great tip to be, talking to the staff while you're waiting in the line. Yeah.
Can I give another staff suggestion tip?
Yeah.
Early this year, there were obviously a variety of things that looked quite chaotic as far as a logical science policy and a logical climate policy, and also the sort of the excellent lead staff member that we had with Senator King, who we had a very good relationship, first name, very good relationship with, was moving on in his career, made a good move earlier this year. And so we found out who the two new people most relevant to, let's say, the protection of NOAA, which was the monthly call that month, early this year. And we invited both of those members of the staff just to have a call. This was not on the regular schedule. This was not in a summer or winter. We just wanted to support them and make them know that as they come newly into their jobs, that they have people who really care and really support them. And it was wonderful, wonderful, very rewarding exchange. And I could tell they were really, really appreciative.
Each of you have talked a little bit about bringing people to meetings, and one of the things we've been encouraging our volunteers to do is to find trusted messengers. So I wonder if you can give some examples of who you've reached out to and what you look for as a trusted messenger when you bring them to meetings.
Oh, Linda.
I could start there. This is a good story. Senator Stabenow, chair of the Ag Committee, was very focused on the Farm Bill. And we had the liaison that had been working with the office for years, doing outstanding work, decided because of the Farm Bill, pass the baton to another person who had been really Sue Holcomb, who'd been really active on CCL's Ag and Forestry Action Team. She had built connections across the country and was able to bring CCL experts. So trusted messengers, these were internal CCL folks, people like Klaus Mager, Paul Overby, but a DNR forester who's a volunteer. The staff was so impressed and really appreciative. So internally, we've got some great trusted messengers.
That's fantastic. Yeah, knowing the background of each other as volunteers can really be helpful in that. And Kay, I know you brought a number of groups to the walk with.
We brought a number of groups to the walk. Our intent for our hike this summer was to engage others who cared about climate and bring them to a lobby meeting, because they were people who might not schedule a lobby meeting on their own. And we wanted Representative Bacon to see the breadth of the community that really cares about climate. When we've done some smaller meetings with Representative Bacon in the past on specific legislation, I think it's been really helpful to meet with some of his trusted messengers, which are people in his political sphere. We've developed a really strong relationship with a former congressman and lobbied him on carbon fee and dividend, and gotten him to support addressing climate, and then taken him to a meeting with Representative Bacon. So lobbying people in the political sphere beyond just your congressperson, I think is important, so that they get familiar with who CCL is. Even if they don't agree with every piece of legislation, at least they know who we are, that we're respectful, that we're nonpartisan. And sometimes they'll say, oh, that sounds interesting. Maybe we should, put a price on carbon.
And how do you do that? Do you like make cold calls to people, or do you look for someone that knows them, attend meetings where you can get to know them? How do you do that?
We found somebody who has a relationship with them. That's often worked well. Um, some of us have just lobbied, like the Young Republicans had their national conference in Omaha. So we signed up to have a table so that we could see, we lobbied Young Republicans at their national conference. And that was really fruitful, because we had dialogue one-on-one with the people who are most conservative and most engaged politically. Um, we've also gone to, pancake feeds and talked to people and met people there. So the political community is much smaller than we expected. So it's easy to get to know people here.
Thank you. Those are some great tips. David.
Our Senator King lives in Brunswick, Maine, which is also the home of Bowdoin College. And in a couple of our meetings, we have had two superb volunteers who were, kind of identified through networking and careful research and careful conversations and outreach, mostly by Peter Dugas. And so he found the senior economist, David Vail from Bowdoin College, and he found a college student from Bowdoin who is majoring in economics, who happens also to be the daughter of John Gage, the lead in New Hampshire. And the two of them, came at like the two sides of a lobster claw, came at our senator from, big heavyweight and really passionate and thoughtful young voice. And so we have tried to a couple of different routes to the trusted messenger.
Yeah. You also talked about having the labor leader and the businessman
Yes.
there. How did you develop those kinds of relationships?
Again, it's a matter of reaching out and asking and asking. It does help a little bit that Maine is a state of not quite 1.4 million. So it's a little harder to do in California, where I used to live, where there's 40 million people. But still, there you think about what it is you want, what message you want, what is the next step in the conversation with your member of Congress, because those are all very carefully documented by CCL, and everybody who's going into a meeting should have read that history. And if you know that next step, then you say, okay, we really need to have this expertise. And then you ask and ask and ask until somebody makes a connection. Oh, okay, there, boom.
That's fantastic. Well, we're starting to get a number of questions from the audience, so I want to make sure that I can bring in some of those. Linda asks, I wonder if each of you can talk about whether you do outreach to conservatives in your area and how that's going. Okay, you had the one example of
she gets her conservative to sweat.
Well, and also going to the Young Republicans Conference.
Yes, and we've lobbied the head of Young Republicans. We've essentially tried to have a dialogue. Because we're a Republican state, it's important to get to know those who are politically engaged in that party and to make them familiar with Citizens Climate Lobby, which is very different than some of the other climate organizations that they see nationally and locally. So it's important to give them a different view of an environmentalist and different policy options than let's let the government pay for everything. So,
David or Linda, do you have any examples of outreach to conservatives in your state?
We're constantly reaching and not always connecting. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah. We've built, we do some joint work with a group called Land and Liberty, which is a very conservative group that's focused on clean energy and permitting reform. So that's been a really great connection. So finding groups that have similar goals has worked well.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion too, because it's always changing, right? So it's a good reminder to go and look again at what groups might be working on what we're most concerned about at the time.
Yeah. And I should also say that the prior leader of the main chapter of CCL had been a Republican, and although he's primarily a scientist and a hydrogeologist, he had been, and he often goes to the CCL conservative conferences in the springtime. Peter Garrett has a good sort of solid reputation of working on both sides of the aisle. But another thing is that we happen to have representing to an independent, and our other senator is the only Republican senator in New England, Susan Collins. And so frequently some of our open-ended questions are, Senator King, how is the conversation in the Senate Climate Solutions Caucus going? As an independent there, are you the keystone in the middle that can make both sides of this giant arch hold together, or can you lean over and talk to any frequently recounts good conversation? And then we frequently ask both of our senators, are you talking to the other? And they do occasionally co-sponsor. Senator Collins co-wrote with a Democrat the CREST Act, the Carbon Removal and Emissions Storage Technologies Act, and immediately Chris Coons, Democrat, Cassidy, a Republican, and independent King came on. So we had 2 Dems, 2 Republicans, 1 independent backing that bill, and we can have cross-office communication and support of one another.
Yeah, having those examples for them. But that's also good to, sometimes we assume that a delegation from a state is always talking to each other. And it's not always true, right? Exactly. No. It's good to remind them, oh, have you talked to your fellow senator or to your fellow representative about that? Yeah. We have another question from Cliff, and I think this one's specifically for you, Kay. Curious to learn how you got Representative Bacon to the hike, since we've had a lot of difficulty getting our member of Congress out on a hike.
We were worried about asking for an hour and a half, because that's a lot longer of a time frame than we normally ask for, but we hadn't met with Representative Bacon for more than a year. So it was a simple ask and a yes, and then a reminder to dress appropriately and wear shoes to hike in and those sorts of things, so that we felt he would come prepared. And it all worked out splendidly, and he really loved going on the hike and wants to do it again next year. I think a lot of members of Congress don't have time to get a walk or a workout in, and so giving them that chance is hopefully something that they'll take willingly.
And you had some idea that he enjoyed getting exercise, right? That
he was in the Air Force for a long time. So cater it to, know your member, cater it to your member, of course.
Yeah, that's why I like the example of, if they're not one that necessarily likes physical activity, or would be open to it, that try something else, right? Like Linda, you tried the tree planting, knowing that was a different type of activity. Yeah. Thank you. I have another question here. What are your greatest accomplishments that you've made when speaking with your lawmaker, or what is a favorite moment of lobbying? This is from Osric. David, go ahead.
A year and a half ago, I went to a campaign event that Senator King was holding at the home of the president of one of the best solar companies in Maine, which happens to be in Scarborough, where I live. And so I immediately put up my hand and went. And as I go in, there's a big spread of food and things. And who's standing at that food, but at that big table, but the slender Senator King. And again, I was wearing a tag. And so he said, Citizens Climate Lobby, here's what's wrong with your proposal. And I said, Senator, let me say what I think you're going to say, because I'd heard it before. Your solution of a carbon tax is enough to be annoying, but not enough to be effective. And he said, you're right. That is exactly what I say about it. Can we talk some more? And we talked just for a minute, but he had 50 constituents and supporters to talk to. And he said, you're coming to DC, right? I want to talk with you individually when you do, so that we can really get into this conversation some more, because I showed him we're listening hard and we're responding, and we're always trying to take it one step further. And so Peter Dugas and I went in and had a just sort of 2-on-1 meeting with him and a senior member of his staff that was very, very helpful, I think, in helping to turn him towards our solution.
And that was in addition to a group
And
lobby meeting that you had the
exactly,
same
we had a
day.
group lobby meeting in the morning, but he wasn't going to be in yet. So the two of us met in the afternoon with the center. And then the next day we enjoyed the blueberry cake, and everybody, he took pictures and he signed that picture.
Linda, we have one question for you of how much money did you have to raise for the trees and the granite marker, and how did you raise it?
Wow, I think it was close to a couple $1,000s. I should have checked, but I think that's close. And we raised it from volunteers. Yeah. There was a lot of appreciation around the state, and people just, $5 here, $10 there. We had some big, that's how we did it.
That's fantastic.
I'd like to go back and answer the last question.
Yeah.
And I think this can apply to everybody who's involved with CCL. I think generally the greatest accomplishment is when you get your member on a piece of legislation and then it actually becomes law. Mm-hmm. So Representative Bacon was a retired Air Force general. Climate change was not on his radar at all. But the time we've spent with him and the time other groups have spent with him has caused him to be a lead co-sponsor on the Growing Climate Solutions Act, which got rolled into the Farm Bill and which actually became law. He got on to other bills that we asked him to join, that he wouldn't have gotten on except for we've gone in and lobbied him, or other groups have gone in and lobbied him on the issue of climate, and it was something that he could get on. So I think that can apply to every single CCL member, every single group. When you're able to get your member on a piece of legislation and it becomes law, that is a huge accomplishment.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And even the accomplishment of watching them shift from climate not being something that they've thought about at all to now understanding a lot more about it and how they can have an impact. Yeah. Oh, Linda, I forgot. Oh, sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Well, the other thing is you can only ask so much of your members. As a Republican, Representative Bacon is all of the above energy strategy is where he is. And that includes renewables. So taking that as a win and saying, okay, I have a member who's supporting clean energy, just because he's supporting fossil fuels too, that's as far as we could take him. But being proud and accepting where your member is important.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point. Linda, I didn't get to give you a chance to talk about a highlight or a favorite moment from a lobby meeting. Well,
I've been thinking about that, and I don't know that I have a favorite. I think, though, that I'm continually, I don't know what the word is. It's so wonderful to go into a meeting with some ideas about expecting some resistance, but that discipline of asking an open-ended question and listening, discovering, oh my gosh, there's some really legitimate questions, concerns, things that we can talk about. The dialogue opens. It's just having that happen over and over is very, very rewarding and underscores the importance of how we do what we do.
That's perfect. Well, thank you. We need to move on to our last session. I want to take one last opportunity to thank all of you for joining us today for this really informative panel, and for all the questions that we were able to get to. So thank you very much for all of your work, and I am delighted to now pass it on to Ricky Bradley.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear?
Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.